like a match being struck. There are moments sometimes in my life when anger pays an unannounced, unexpected visit. There are times when frustration just fumes within me. And then those times, I sense it. I sense it from the top of my head to the very tip of my toe. This whole frustration just coursing throughout my entire body. I feel it as my mind starts to dart in different directions. That tiny vein in my neck starts to pulsate like it's doing some kind of disco dance. My heart races, my breathing becomes shallow, all while my stomach is churning somersaults. We feel, each and every one of us knows that feeling of frustration in our bodies. We know what it's like to have anger course throughout our entire being. And I think so often within the church, we haven't talked about anger. Or when we do, we can end up preaching as though sounding like we're a bit like the piety police saying, just don't go there. Or like an overprotective parent telling us just to stay away. But we're so hardwired in our minds that the second someone tells you not to think about it, it's all you can think about. For example, if I tell you, don't think of cake, now all you're going to be able to think about is cake for the rest of the sermon. It's a good thing there's some over in Seister Hall after worship today. And so I'm grateful. I'm actually grateful that Paul doesn't self-edit his letter to the Galatians. That he doesn't weed out these passionate words. And I can almost picture Paul as he's dictating this letter to someone. I can picture him pacing back and forth. The frustration that must have been fuming off of him. He just can't seem to get the words out quick enough to communicate to the church in Galatia what he wanted to say. And I think that offers us an opportunity this morning to be honest and heartfelt at the times we become disenchanted and disheartened, flummoxed, frustrated, and angry in the course of our daily living. What was at the heart of Paul's frustration was this deep division that was happening early on in the Christian church. On the one side, you had Paul. Paul, who was preaching, and what he had taught the Galatians was this unconditional grace of God. This unceasing love, this embrace that included everyone, whoever you are, wherever you are in life's journey. Paul welcomed not only folks who understood and had followed a Jewish way, but also Gentiles as well. Welcomed every person as uniquely and beautifully created in God's image. That was the heart of the gospel as Paul understood it, the way that he lived it, and what he had taught and preached to the church in Galatia. And then he left. He left that church and journeyed on in other places. And in that vacuum of leadership, another group comes in. Scholars often call this group that came into Galatia Judaizers. And these were folks who felt a little uneasy about that extravagant embrace. These were folks who had been raised Jewish and felt as though some of Paul's theology deconstructed everything that they knew to be true and what they trusted. It made them uneasy and uncomfortable. And so they taught faith in Jesus in a little different way and light. Their basic theology was to say to the church in Galatia, it is great that all of you are here, But for you Gentiles, we'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't bring the bacon-wrapped meatballs to the church potluck. And by the way, we have just a few laws we'd like you to follow, about 613. You can study them there. And by the way, Gentile gentlemen, we need to talk to you about circumcision. And it was at that point all of the Gentile gentlemen said, "Would you look at the time, we've got to go." There was this tension, a diversity of different understandings. And so, could you imagine a world where there's a variety of voices, each going in a distinctive way? And some of those are in tension and tear at that fabric of unity. I'm trying to be sarcastic here to make a point of the relevance, right? We feel that. We feel that variety of voices pulling us in different directions today. We know what it's like to have to sort out, who do we trust? Where's the truth at in the midst of all of this? We know what it's like to feel that anger coursing within us, sometimes daily, the relationships that are broken. And so part of what Paul allows us to look at is not just his own passion or this distant argument over dietary laws and circumcision that might seem quaint, but the ripples of relevance today. And the deeper truth, I think, for us as the church is that we've always struggled and strived to find our unity in community. There's always been this prayerful hope of how do we listen to different, diverse, distinctive voices, especially when there's dissonance and not harmony. Part of what Paul is pointing at here in the second chapter of Galatians, of his letter to the Galatians, is that there was never a time when the church just sat around holding hands, singing Kumbaya, and enjoying a Coca-Cola. We've always struggled a bit with our diversity, just as there are different denominations today. There were a variety of voices in Paul's day they were trying to sort out, and that we still try to sort through in our lives today. And so I give thanks. I give thanks that what Paul is doing here in the second chapter of his letter to the Galatians is trying to process some of that pain. He's not just holding it down. He's not pushing his passion down. He's speaking the truth as he understands it. And this is important, he doesn't stay stuck there. The rest of the letter, as we'll continue to study it, in 2 weeks from now, we will land in Galatians chapter 3, which I think is one of the best vision statements for the church today. Later on in July, we'll land in the fruits of the Spirit. And we're going to sit there for a couple of weeks tasting and touching and letting those fruits minister to us, to take root in our lives. Part of what I want you to hear in a bigger picture is that as Paul processes his pain, he doesn't stay there. He lets it move him in new directions. Out of the chaos that he was feeling as he started the letter, it moves him into a creative expression, a deeper expression of his faith. And so this morning, we can take a few moments and focus faithfully on our own frustrations, on our own anger. You know, just like that match I lit. That match that I lit, the fire could be used to help keep us warm or to cook something. Or if we're not careful, that fire can burn us. Fire can often provide a light in the midst of the darkness, or it can be destructive and destroy our lives and the lives of others. That's the truth with anger as well, frustration. As a matter of fact, I think if we're listening to what Paul is doing in chapter 2 and processing that pain he's carrying, part of what he's doing is reminding himself to listen and to ask the deeper question, why? I think so often we're good at telling somebody that we're angry, but we don't always listen or ask the next question, why? Why am I so frustrated? We don't often just sit with that silently for a while. One of the people I was listening to this last week was reminding me that our emotions, every single emotion we feel, from anger to extravagant joy, that's energy. And energy is what can give us life and move us. But if we're not careful and paying attention, that energy can take us in all different directions. And so as we sit with some of that anger or frustration that flummoxes us, ask that question, why? And an even deeper truth that I try to sit with is that for those folks who frustrate me, people who have that ability to push all my buttons and are amazingly creative, never running out of new material to frustrate me, I also sit with the deeper truth that every person in my life can be a teacher, has something to tell me, sometimes about myself, sometimes the reason why the other person is frustrating me is they're showing me a trait about myself that I don't like so much. Or maybe they're saying a perspective that I don't agree with. Or maybe it's just something else. To sit intentionally, prayerfully, thoughtfully, with all that is stirring within us. That's the invitation, I believe, for us this week. So like that match that I lit, like that spark and that light, can we pay attention to what's roaming around in our hearts this day and this week? And may there be a spark of creativity, and especially of God's love and presence, as we move through all we experience in this life. Amen.